All right, I'll give you like a 3-second pause, Tyler, so we have a break.
All right.
All right, we are welcoming in ESPN's own Matthew Berry. He decided to come on our podcast. You know, he's not really well known in the industry, and he's like, you know what? I think the Dynasty Howard launching the stratosphere and get my name out there. So, Matt, we are here to make you famous. We want to talk some Dynasty fantasy football with you. Yes, you know, anything we can do to help out anyone in the community.
I'm just trying to get the name out there, just trying to hustle a little bit, trying to just build the brand, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like a lot of people are, and yeah, we're just here to help.
That's right. So
yeah,
at Matt
that's
Berry
what we do.
please follow me.
Yes, absolutely. We're here to lift each other up in the industry, which is nice. I have some questions for you. First of all, the thing I want to know, I know that you do a lot of redraft coverage on ESPN. Obviously, that's your bread and butter over on ESPN. So how involved are you in Dynasty fantasy football? Give me an idea of like how many leagues that you're in, and then maybe what kind of leagues that you're in. Do you do auction? Like, what does that look like?
So I'm in 4 different Dynasty leagues right now. I'm in so the biggest one that I'm in is I'm in a one called the DFB Invitational. And so that is a 12-team super flex Dynasty league with 33-man rosters, PPR, tight end premium scoring, and that Scott Barrett put that together. And it's a bunch of names that if you follow fantasy Twitter at all, it's a bunch of names that you recognize. It's Scott Barrett and Evan Silva and Graham Barfield and Pat Thorman, Rich Rebar, Lord Reeves is in it, Danny Kelly from The Ringer, Jeff El Jefe, Jeff Collins as well, Davis Maddock, CJ Kaltenbach, Bob Harris, the legend Bob Harris. I'm sure there's a couple of people that I'm forgetting as well, but that's
so it's slightly competitive,
highly competitive. I am the defending champ. I won this year. I have led the league for 2 straight years in total points scored. I lost a heartbreak in year 1 by 1 point to Graham Barfield. I'm still not over it, but I lost on the Aaron Jones 56-yard touchdown on Monday Night Football against the Vikings. Remember when the Vikings?
I lost in a championship. We won that too, Matt.
Yeah,
I won 3 championships in a row. I was going for my 4th, and that play put me out. So, yeah.
I mean, like, listen, Minnesota, you're at home on Monday Night Football in front of your fans. The game is for the division title. Have some pride, Mike Zimmer. Play some defense. Like, Aaron Jones was literally not trying to score on that play. They were just running out the clock. Make a tackle.
I mean, I'm up here in Minnesota, so I can actually go talk to Zim. We could figure some out. Maybe I could talk to Charch, and then he can talk to Zim. We'll maybe go that route. That way, I'm not involved. I don't have to deal with it.
But anyway, so that's a Dynasty league I'm in. I'm in a 25-man roster, Superflex Dynasty league with a bunch of the people at ESPN that you're familiar with if you watch us at all. Field Yates and Mike Clay and Daniel Dopp and Stefania Bell and Thirsty Kyle Soppy from our podcast, and some of the other people behind the scenes as well. The Statapillar from the Fantasy Show, Damon Dabrowski, Scott Clark, All Biz, if you listen to the podcast. Anyway, so that one, I'm in a Dynasty league with a bunch of my college buddies. It's actually the longest league I've been in. It's not a true Dynasty. It's half point PPR, 1 quarterback, 12-team league, but 18. So it's not a true Dynasty. It's somewhere between a Dynasty and a keeper. You guys tell me how I should frame it. 18-man rosters, and you can keep 13 with no penalty at all forever. So like you draft I drafted Joe Burrow. Like I'll have Joe Burrow for his entire career if I want. So I drafted
him.
It's
like a 75% Dynasty, like 25% redraft mix. Yeah, for the most part.
Right. I mean, so we do a 5-round redraft draft every year. That is anyone, but it's usually rookies, but there'll be 1 or 2 people that get thrown back. So you keep 13 out of 18, and there's no penalty. You keep any 13 you want, and you keep them as long as you want. So that's sort of the Dynasty piece of it. And then I joined this year I think Ryan McDowell started it. I did a Twitter best ball Dynasty league. So it's a Dynasty. We did a draft, and we'll do another draft, and I think there's like 1 free agent pickup like just before the season starts, and then otherwise it's best ball.
Nice. In that DFB league, the one that Scott Barrett started. So you've had a lot of success in that league, multiple years in a row. What have been the key pieces to that success from a player standpoint?
Just being better than everyone in my league, I think, has been the biggest key.
Always the key.
Listen, there's a couple of things that I've done there, right? Is that number one is like, listen, I drafted well, right? I mean, so I had some, we did it 2 years ago, and some of the players that I drafted later, listen, I got, it's tight end premium. I got Darren Waller late, right? Who's a big sleeper for me last year. So Waller the baller, obviously that's been huge. Some of my mid-round running backs, Austin Eckler, Chris Carson, those guys paid off. Robert Woods is a guy that's always underrated. Got him late, I think relative to where he should have gone in a dynasty startup. So I got Robert Woods. So it's a good team. I made a couple of really smart trades. I had the 8th pick overall, and Scott Barrett and his partner and our commissioner, TJ Calkins. So Barrett and TJ play together, and they had the 7th pick. And with the 7th pick, they took Mahomes. And I thought Mahomes actually should have been 101 in a super dynasty draft. But Mahomes fell all the way to 7. And I was just like, oh, Mahomes is going to follow me. Mahomes is going to follow me. And then they did it. And so I traded my first round pick, my 8, to TJ and Scott for Mahomes. I traded 8 and my 4th round pick that year for Mahomes. And they ended up using those picks on Carson Wentz and Juju Smith-Schuster.
Ooh.
Which at the time seemed good. I mean,
Juju was hot in the streets then. Yeah.
Right.
So was Wentz.
So that obviously worked out for me, obviously. But I traded a 1 and a 4. I traded the 8th overall and a 4th round pick for the 7th overall pick to get Mahomes. And so that obviously, and then I made a trade late in the season last year for Ryan Tannehill. So nice. I only have 2 quarterbacks in the league, but my 2 quarterbacks are Mahomes and Tannehill. And so, and then the other thing that I did is I've been aggressive in terms of trading. I'm a big believer in dynasty, and listen, the bill's going to come due here pretty soon. It's going to be ugly. That's why I got to talk trash now, because it's going to be some lean years. Listen, flags fly forever. And so I had no first round. I had no rookie picks this year. I have no rookie picks next year. And I don't even have a number 1 in 2022. But I have a loaded team because I traded for Kelsey. I traded for Ezekiel Elliott. Because my sort of feeling like my team was, after I saw the success I was having middle of the first year, I'm like, you know what? I'd rather load up and again, I was 1 point away from a back-to-back titles. The idea is like, no one remembers 2nd place, no one remembers 5th, but flags fly forever. So I basically went into a win now mode, and hopefully that by the time everyone's old, I'll have developed, I'll make some shrewd trades and some smart pickups, and keep it going. But that's been part of the process as well.
Yeah, you just got to hit those 2nd round picks, the Antonio Gibsons. You got to hit on those instead. And
well, I mean, I've had some nice luck in terms of J.D. McKissick was a free agent pickup for me this year. Again, it's a 12-team, 33-man roster league, so there's not much out there.
RB2 the second half of the season, pretty much. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that McKissick was going to have a role, so early in the year I picked him up. After we do a 4-round rookie draft, and after the rookie draft, then the ones that weren't drafted are free agents, and I aggressively not this year but last year he wasn't drafted. Was Myles Gaskin, and I was aggressive in bidding for Myles Gaskin, and so obviously that worked out for me this year as well. So just trying to find your sort of spots there, and so just sort of banking on my ability to find some of those uncover gems and to surround myself. But I think that's an important part of dynasty, is knowing where you are in the cycle, right? Like someone said this to me, and I think this is so true. There's absolutely nothing in this world worse. And I know this because I experienced this last year in that league. there's nothing in the world worse than finishing second in Dynasty.
Yeah,
yeah,
I agree with that. I could
league
this year and the year before, so I totally
could probably
get that.
say middle. Being in the middle and kind of like right on. Okay, do I go for it or do I sell it for rookie picks? That might be a close second, but no, I agree. Like I lost to Doug 2 years ago in a podcast league, and I still just hate him for it. Like we just butt heads all the time.
I won that 2 years ago, and I have the 101 this year. So it just goes to show, like, hey, I won that year, and then I had injuries and everything this year, and I was like, you know what? Like my team is not. I sold some pieces off, and I got the 101. So welcome Trevor Lawrence to pair up with Joe Burrow. I'm ready to go in a super flex. So, it's part of the rebuild, and that's the fun part.
In the ESPN the Dynasty League, just to this point, not to just talk about my teams, but I think it's instructive for your listeners. Like, so in that league, like my team got old and injured quick. So it's a super flex league. And again, 25. So my quarterback's Baker and Big Ben, and I have McCaffrey and I had Mike Davis, but still, Mike Davis fell off. I had, guys like Tariq Cohen and T.Y. Hilton, who, by the time T.Y. Hilton woke up this year, it was too late. Same with, I had like Emmanuel Sanders. So that team got old real quick. And because I had drafted to sort of be in win now mode, and I think I finished 4th last year. So I quickly realized 2 or 3 weeks in, ain't me. This ain't my year. Especially with McCaffrey, his injury. Once McCaffrey went down, I'm like, all right. So I started tanking for Trevor. Like I admitted it to the entire, like, guys, I am tanking for Trevor. And that's what I did. It's like I still fielded a competitive lineup, but not like I wasn't.
You want to do it in the most ethical way possible. Like
that is correct. Like, so I would still start, a reasonable starting lineup, but also a lineup that I thought was more likely to lose than not, given the pieces I had. And like I made trades that would help me in the future, but hurt me this year. So, I'm starting Gabriel Davis, right? Like I love Gabriel Davis, but like he's a better pick 3 years from now than he is, last year where he really only had, success when John Brand was out. So stuff like that, you know what I mean? And like, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think it is very important to be hyper aware of how realistic your chances are to win in Dynasty. And if you don't have a chance at winning, if you don't have a legit shot at winning, and then like, hey, it's fantasy and luck can happen and bad luck can happen, but look in the mirror time, be honest with yourself and your team. And if you don't have like a better than average shot at winning, for me, play for next year. That's the great thing about Dynasty.
Yep. And
you can
I want to go back to the
like
league.
A keeper redraft thing too.
Yeah, I want to go back to the league with like Rich Rebar. Lord Reeves, I made a trade with him last year in a Capitalist Pigs League, and it's run by Scott Fish. I'm pretty sure everybody who's listening knows who Scott Fish is, but
love Scott.
Yeah,
Fish.
And he was the hardest person I've ever had to trade with. Like Doug can attest to this. I made tons of trades in my life. I love trading. It's almost an addiction.
He gets the itch more than anyone else I've ever met. like
last night in the middle of the night, I was just like, I feel like I need to make a move. And I was like thinking of players in my head that are on the buy low. But going back to Rebar, I tried to get Herbert from him before he was even drafted. And I mean, he was holding tight and I had to overpay. And that just goes to test, like, that league is insane. And I can't even imagine the offers and the trade talks. And like, I'm jealous that you get to do that.
I think what you're saying, Tyler, is you hate Rich Rebar, and it's, you never like to see, you never like people to see, there to be controversy, but it is what it is. I understand, not everyone's going to get along. So whatever, Rich probably hates you too. And listen, I love both of you. I'm Sweden here between this fiery, angry feud between you and Rich Rebar, but I'm not going to pick a side here, but I get it. Both of you guys are very smart fantasy analysts, and sometimes those type of guys butt heads.
That's right. Yeah, they do. So let's
jokes aside, Rebar is an incredibly good I think he's just an incredibly good fantasy player and fantasy analyst.
Yeah.
Really, really smart and talented.
I love his worksheet. It's one of my favorite things every week in fantasy football. So yeah,
he does an absolute great job. And I own this website called Roto, and we made a deal this year with Warren Sharp and his Sharp Football Analysis to be part of Roto. And a big reason that I did that, I love Warren, but also because I was like, oh, you mean I get my Roto subscribers will get access to Rich Rebar's worksheet? Sold. I'm in. And so, I mean, Rich is a good dude and a really smart fantasy football analyst. And yes, as somebody who competes against him in a dynasty league, he's a pain in the ass as well in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Anyone listening, you can follow him at Lord Reeves, by the way, on Twitter. So make sure you do that. He's a very, very intelligent, brilliant man. So let's move it along a little bit. I want to get inside of a DeLorean. I want to get to 88 miles an hour, and I want to go back in time. And Matt, I want to know if you can remember your first ever fantasy football player that you drafted. I know what mine is.
I think. Well, here's what So the very first thing that I ever did was fantasy baseball. So I did fantasy baseball in 1984 when I was 14 years old. And I didn't play fantasy football until, I want to say, 1990. It was when I was a sophomore in college. I believe the first player I ever drafted in fantasy football was Cordell Stewart back in his slash days when he was the quarterback, quarterback wide receiver, when he was slash. Cordell Stewart, I think, was the first guy. But the very first player I have ever rostered in any fantasy format ever was Tony Gwynn.
Oh, beautiful.
I paid $37 for Tony Gwynn in a 10-team NL only fantasy baseball auction in 1984. He had a very good year.
Do you still play fantasy baseball?
I don't.
Yeah, I used to play it every year loyally, and I haven't played in the last few years. It just became with fantasy football being year round. I just didn't the grind anymore. Just wasn't for me with fantasy baseball.
Yeah, it's the same for me. No, I love it.
Do it anymore.
In one fantasy basketball league. Last year was the first year I didn't play fantasy baseball. Because of pandemic and COVID and just and then what ended up happening, to your point, is that I would fantasy baseball. Because in my busiest month is August. Like I am.
Yep. Draft season.
ESPN keeps me busy throughout the year, but in August, I'm doing a podcast every day. I'm on TV every day. Plus Sunday we always do a lot of events and stuff, and there's always special things that we do for advertisers. We have the marathon as well, which just is an awesome event, but kills me and so just basically. Like, I can't tell you how many years I had a first-place fantasy baseball team, and then August comes, and by the end of August, I'm in fourth because I just can't – you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I'll do it tonight before I go to bed, and then I just fall asleep, and I've got to be up in 4 hours, and I'm like, well, I'll look at it tomorrow, and you know what I mean? And people are sending me trade offers or, why are you starting this guy on the DL? I just became a bad manager, right? Yeah. It's not how I like to – be, and especially because you're in a league with Matthew Berry or whoever, anyone that does, there's an expectation that that I'm not the dead weight, you know what I mean? And what happens is come August, I'm the dead weight. I'm literally a guy that's starting an injured player or whatever. And it became diminishing returns. So I just, I didn't want to be that guy that, quits basically August 1st for the last 2 months of the season. And that,
you last longer. You last a lot longer than I do. I'm usually drafting in March, and then April hits, and I'm like, okay, I'll last 2 weeks, be fully committed. Then the NFL draft happens, and I'm gone. Like I have trouble.
Yeah, there are pockets for us, right? I mean, because we do a bunch of content around the NFL. For me, like when free agency hits, I'll do a podcast. I'll do an updated rankings. I'll do a love-hate based on winners and losers in free agency. Then the NFL draft hits, same thing. We'll do a reaction podcast. We'll do a bunch of videos around, new places and new faces, free agency as well. So there's a lot of content demands. Again, updated rankings. We'll do a podcast. We'll do a TV show. We'll do episodes of the Fantasy Show on ESPN Plus for both free agency and the draft. And then, so there's like 3 weeks there where I'm not nearly as engaged in fantasy baseball as I probably should be at that point in the season. And then, and I also, listen, I'm married. I have 5 kids. They don't see me during the football season. So I try to, like, during the spring and summer, spend a lot of time with them because they know come August 1st, they're like, all right, we'll see you January 1.
See you, Dad.
Yeah. So, yes. So that's a long way of saying no, I don't play fantasy baseball anymore, unfortunately. So there you go.
Tyler, what was your first football fantasy draft pick? Or player that you picked?
I'm pretty sure it was Adrian Peterson his rookie year.
Oh, nice.
I mean, I'm up here in Minnesota, and we had Chester Taylor, and people had the idea he was going to still start, was Chester Taylor, and AP kind of fell, I think, to the third, and it was a one keeper league. So I'm like, I'll reach. I took him in the second, and then I had him, and then 1 year I decided to make a trade. I'm also a Falcons fan, Matthew. If you don't know, I'm cheating on the Vikings all the time up here. But I made a trade straight up for Michael Turner, and that helped me for 2 years. And then after those 2 fantastic years, I just saw AP take off and have an MVP year, and it was painful. But yeah, he was my first.
Whatever, a decade later, he's still usable in fantasy.
Yeah, I love seeing it. And also, if you're going to buy somebody in fantasy, buy DeAndre Swift, because any running back he tutors, it seems like just blows up. Antonio Gibson, and now Alvin Kamara.
I honestly, listen, with just DeAndre Swift I know later in the show we're going to get into like sort of like guys you're buying in Dynasty, and he's right there. I mean, I think insanely talented. I think had DeAndre Swift gone to the Chiefs instead of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we'd have been talking about him in the same way. Like, I mean, I just don't think people appreciate like how good this guy was in college and sort of the skill level. And then he goes to a Detroit team where the offense is, a challenge. He was hurt in the preseason as well, banged up. Matt Patricia likes a running back by committee. Him and Bob Quinn came from the Belichick school in New England, so that was always going to be a thing. But I think with a new regime there, a fully healthy DeAndre Swift in a rebuilding year for a team that, again, Galladay, Marvin Jones, Danny Amendola, all free agents. So we don't know how many, if any of them, are back with the Lions this year. I think a lot of people feel like Jones, who's very close with Stafford, signs with the Rams. Personally, they're close. Like, their families are close. And
replace Josh Reynolds for him, kind of the same skill set.
Yeah, and
Jones is better.
Deep threat. I mean, I think that's the thing about the Rams. The Rams need a deep threat.
Yeah.
Like Brandon Cooks, even though Brandon Cooks sort of, petered out there, like the idea of Brandon Cooks, even if you never got him the ball, just the fact that you had to, let a safety run with him, like, just opened up the field. And so for Stafford, who loves to sling it deep, like, they're going to need to, I don't think there's anyone on their team right now. Like, can Woods go deep? Sure. Could Van Jefferson go deep? Yeah. But I mean, I think they need a legit.
They're more technicians than they are field stretchers.
Yeah. I was thinking Will Fuller. Will Fuller would be a nice player for them.
Yeah. Honestly, even Galladay. I mean, Galladay is a free agent. I know he wants to get paid, but Will Fuller would be amazing there. But at any rate, the point is that I think DeAndre Swift's going to have a monster year coming up. Given who the coaches are and given what else they have, and he'll come in fully healthy. And
and it just seemed once he was starting to get that momentum, he got that concussion and then missed a few weeks, and it was like, it felt like it was happening, and then it stopped.
Right.
And
he had the monster game in week 14, knocked me out of the playoffs in a couple of leagues, where he had the he had the 2 touchdown game and should have been the 3 touchdown game because he fumbled on the 1.
Yep.
And I was playing against him in a bunch of leagues. I'm like, he fumbled on the 1. Come on, give it to Peterson. And then what do you mean you're going back to him? Like, you haven't gone back to him all year. The 1 week you're playing me? Come on.
I'll tell you what, though, the touchdown drop Swift had in week 1 was probably the most painful, because I was one of the biggest Swift truthers throughout the season, and he's my most owned player in dynasty leagues. I think I don't own him in 2 of my 8 leagues. I don't own him in, but when he dropped that, I could just feel Matt Patricia just be angry at him, and I was like, oh no, this is not going to be good.
It opened up a perfect buying opportunity, though. That's the dynasty. The way that dynasty works is if a player like that, and you're like, oh, he has a national moment where he drops a touchdown. It's like, and I know Tyler's eyes, like, because you went out and bought him after that in some leagues that you didn't.
Yes.
Have. That's what I love about dynasty, is that the values change a play. One single play can change a player's value in people's minds, which is beautiful. So you can either maximize on that, or sometimes you get burned by it, but it's a beautiful thing. Just to wrap up this part, my first player ever that I remember drafting as a rookie was Sean Alexander. So I had him as a rookie, and then he had a nice career for a little while until he wrapped up with your Washington football team when he was all done at the end.
We for a while there, we led the league in guys that should have been out of the league and totally done, and we signed him to one last big contract. The
Deion Sanders and
Bruce Smith, Mark Brunell. I mean, it was
I mean, you caught our eye up here in Minnesota. We saw you doing that. We're like, maybe we could do that with quarterbacks. And then we did like Brad Johnson. We had Warren Moon, Randall Cunningham.
Hey, Brett Favre worked out though.
Favre worked out.
Yeah.
And so did Cunningham. He was the MVP. Didn't he win an MVP up there? I think so. All right, let's keep it moving.
We do have a question from a listener.
Oh, go right ahead.
14 team, 1 quarterback dynasty, made the ship this year with basically just James Robinson at running back. He's a contending team. He has the 13th pick. Would you trade Watson or Murray for an earlier pick or a veteran, or should you just stay put at 13?
Well,
so I think he's talking rookie picks.
Yes. Well, 2 things. First off, I would want to know. This is a tough question to answer in a dynasty. In general, in a vacuum, I should say as well, without knowing like the strength of your wide receivers. And honestly, no. What I would say no at the moment for 2 reasons. Number one is, listen, you made the championship this year with basically just James Robinson. I expect James Robinson to have another big year next year, right? He's going to be the guy on an improved offense. And also, it's pretty deep this year. So you have the 13th pick. Like, there's a chance you're going to get a very usable piece at 13. So I would, if it was me, I'm a big believer in don't make a decision until you absolutely have to. You don't need to make a decision right now. So I would draft 13. I would want to see where Watson winds up. And, I think that whatever you're willing to, right now, it's a little bit of in a vacuum. Like, I might wait until the season, might wait until the trade deadline, see what you need. But obviously having Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson in a 1 quarterback league and a dynasty league is obviously, one guy's 23, one guy's 25. That's a really enviable position to be in. And so I don't mind trading one of those guys, but I certainly wouldn't trade one of those guys in a dynasty league just for like pick 2 or whatever. Like I would want a haul, and I would want to wait till to a moment when everyone needs a quarterback, right? It's 12-team league, 1 quarterback league. You probably have less. There's probably less of a market for those guys. But I might say, I would see how it plays out, see how the draft plays out, right? And and I think so. You always want to maximize leverage. And I would also, by the way, I wouldn't just trade with one team. I would. If I was doing that, I saw the question was from Bonnie. Bonnie, I would send out a league-wide email saying, all right, guys, I'm trading Kyler Murray or Deshaun Watson. Best offer, make your best offer in the next 24 hours or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And if you're not going to go for picks, I mean, another route you could go is the rookie class this past year was great. I mean, and Antonio Gibson from your team, or even a Dobbins or Swift that we just talked about would be a great option. Akers. And I mean, people are so hyped up on these rookie picks that these picks could actually be more valuable to them in their mind than the last year's rookies. So yeah, like maybe try to get one of those guys.
Evan Silva and I have the same attitude when it comes to Dynasty. I've noticed in this DFB, it's not something we've talked about, but just seeing how he's run his team in the DFB, and no surprise that Silva always has a good team and has competed, well the last 2 years. But I'm always a big believer in, like, for every DeAndre Swift, for every Cam Akers, there's also a lot of Bishop Sankeys, of the world.
I had a feeling you were going to say that name.
Yeah,
David Cobbs.
Yeah, David Cobb, like exactly, like another great example, right? It's just, like everyone was drooling over Henry Ruggs coming into this year, right? I mean, think about where Henry Ruggs went in your dynasty rookie startup this year.
John Ross. He's fast. Oh my God.
Yeah. And Justin Jefferson was getting drafted right next to Henry Ruggs in rookie drafts. So imagine that poor soul.
So I always even if I have to, I'd rather trade for I'd rather trade for people that have proven they can play in the NFL than the hot rookie, especially in dynasties. People are so obsessed with age and hot rookies. And I'd rather like, all right, like I'll take Robert Woods. Like I get it. Robert Woods has a shorter shelf life than some of these guys, but I don't know. I'm going to get top 15, top 20 wide receiver production from Robert Woods for the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. And the same can go for quarterbacks too. Like you were talking about in one of your dynasty leagues, you have Ryan Tannehill paired with, who was it again? Pat Mahomes. And that's a great thing because Tannehill is a top 12 quarterback. And yeah, he has his weeks, but he also is consistent. He shows consistency. He has great weapons. And he's probably 2 to 3 rounds, 3 first rounds cheaper than if you were to go get a Watson or Kyler. So like even getting those cheaper options and like a Gus Edwards at running back, if you needed a running back, Gus Edwards is a free agent. He could either end up in Baltimore again, but I thought, maybe Atlanta could pick him at free agency and he lands in that and he's a starting running back and you got him for a 4th or 3rd round pick instead of, trading one of these big time quarterbacks for a running back.
Yep. Yeah, I'm all about the value when it comes to running back anyway. But let's keep it moving because I know, Matt, you've got some limited time. So I would just want to get into some of your.
I have 12 minutes. I have a hard out at 4 o'clock. So
yeah, no worries. We'll get you out of here by then. So I want to know what are some of the players that you're targeting this offseason in Dynasty that you are kind of looking at the landscape of fantasy football and saying, all right, I see this name and that's a guy that I want to go try to acquire because I think his price is pretty attractive right now. And you can start with any position, whatever your brain takes you to.
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, look, do I think that, I think if I can get DK Metcalf for anything less than #1 wide receiver in dynasty value, I would do that trade.
Okay.
DK Metcalf is 22 years old or whatever it is. And
in a 30-year-old body.
In a 30-year-old body with an accurate quarterback, who also never gets hurt. Russell Wilson's going to play for 6, 7, 8 more years. Like Wilson never gets hurt. And, they've talked about how they work out together, that their goal is Montana and Rice. Like that's their goal. They want to be thought of, Wilson and Metcalf want to be thought of in the same breath as Montana and Rice in terms of a quarterback wide receiver combination. So, DK Metcalf is like my #1 wide receiver in Dynasty right now. That's who I would want. So given his situation, his age, and the production we've seen so far. So, obviously really like him. I'm a huge Allen Robinson believer, and I have to believe that wherever he winds up this year will be a better situation and a better quarterback. When you think about
it, can't get much worse in his career, right? Let's be honest.
From Bortles to Foles to Trubisky, it's been brutal. He always puts up numbers. And so I'm a huge Allen Robinson guy. I do think that Laviska Shenault and DJ Shark and just Jacksonville as a whole is a buy low. I think it's going to be, we'll see what kind of offense Urban and his staff run, but I just think having Trevor Lawrence there obviously upgrades it in a big way. Curtis Samuel, I think, is pretty interesting as well. Whether he resigns with Carolina or goes elsewhere, he's a free agent. But from week 9 on, this is the guy who was the 14th best wide receiver in fantasy. We know about the versatility and the skill set that he has. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, my little Cooper Kupp. Again, obviously, I think that offense takes a big step forward with Stafford. Since McVay took over as head coach in 2017, the Rams are top 5 in passing yards and top 8 in pass attempts in the NFL. And that's been with Jared Goff. And so, I just think Stafford is maybe massive upgrade isn't a fair thing to Jared Goff, but I think he's a significant upgrade. And I think what's even more important is the consistency. Because Goff had games where he was great, but he was just so up and down with it. Stafford level of consistency to that offense.
The improvisation that Matthew Stafford can bring to that offense, because once the play fell apart, Goff was lost a lot of the time. So I think having Stafford there that can kind of make things happen in a way that Jared Goff never could is something that I look forward to watching with him with the Rams.
I'll give you a couple other we mentioned Gabe. I'll just give you some deeper names here. Really like Gabe Davis I know they love him in Buffalo, so I'm just a big fan of that kid's talent. Donald Parham, I think, is an interesting guy.
Doug, that's your dude.
So Matthew, I've been saying you had Darren Waller, you had Logan Thomas. If Hunter Henry doesn't re-sign, it's Donald Parham.
It is absolutely Donald Parham, 1,000%. I have him on of the 4 dynasty leagues. I have him on 2 of them.
I have him in almost every one of mine.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I think a sleeper that I liked a lot this year and it didn't pan out, but I think could be very interesting for next year is Anthony McFarland. James Conner's free agent. I don't think we'll see if he comes back or not, but feels like he's sort of, I don't want to say he's worn out his welcome, but it feels like they're a little, like I like Anthony McFarland.
They're not enthusiastic about having James Conner on the team.
Yeah,
it feels something there. I like Scotty Miller a lot, especially if Brady comes back
and Godwin leaves.
My expectation is Antonio Brown likely comes back. Chris Godwin maybe not. Both AB and Godwin are free agents, and I know if Brady comes back and one of those 2 guys does not, Scotty Miller becomes pretty interesting. I know Brady really likes Scotty Miller. I think
think about Tyler Johnson.
Tyler Johnson too is interesting, right? I mean, like showed some flashes, showed some real flashes there. I mean, also listen, I'm not ready to write off Keyshawn Vaughn just yet. Either.
Oh, I agree.
Same. He's a very affordable dynasty piece right now. You can get
what do you think of Mooney from Chicago?
Darnell Mooney, I love Darnell Mooney. Like,
okay,
they think they found something there, and the quarterback play's got to get more consistent. But in terms of the targets and sort of the air yards, like Mecole Hardman is another guy when you're just thinking about deep threats. But yeah, no, I like Mooney quite a bit. I have him in one league, and I stupidly dropped him in another dynasty league, thinking like, oh, no one's gonna. I needed roster space, and I'm like, he'll still be
sneaky. Yeah,
it never works out. You can never.
The sharks are always in the water.
Sharks are always in the water. One guy that I'm curious about your opinion on, because I go back and forth on this one, is Myles Gaskin. Part of me thinks like I see some of the plays, I watch him, I'm like, this guy could be special, And then there are other times I'm like, nah, he's just a guy. Like I go back and forth on his tape, to be honest, and I sort of feel like Miami's in it. Like I think he could easily be the starting running back with a heavy workload for the Dolphins next year. I also think they could draft a stud in the first round, and you've never heard of. You'll never hear from him or Savon Ahmed.
He'll be a third down back. Yeah.
No,
I like Ahmed a lot this year.
It's funny you asked that because a friend of mine, Lawrence Cheney, who used to do the Devy report, and he is actually up in Washington, and he's actually been to a lot of Washington games. And he was all over Gaskins. He said this guy is a very good player. He had a poor combine, and he had no idea what was going on with the combine because he even said, he showed up really good in Washington. And when he saw him in Miami, he's like, that's the player that we saw up here in Washington University is that player. Like he's patient. He's got good agility. He's not great at anything, but he's a guy that you can depend on. And he's going to get you the yardage. I don't think he's really going to get any negative yardage, but he can catch the ball well. But yeah, I don't know what Miami's going to do. I have friends that are thinking, Miami's going to go a Chase and Najee Harris in the first round, and that could happen. But if people are expecting that, Gaskins is a throw-in for a trade, and you could easily be able to get him.
There's just a lot of free agent running backs this year, and Miami seems to be one landing spot. Like if an Aaron Jones doesn't sign with Green Bay, like Aaron Jones could go to Miami. So yeah, Gaskin is if I could get him at the right price, just to take the risk of like, hey, like he might be the starter there because I like him too, and I like Ahmed as well. He showed out well when he was the starting running back there for a bit too.
I'm a listen, I'm a Jalen Reagor believer, so I think that's somebody that potentially could be interesting as well. Especially
he's dirt cheap.
He's dirt cheap, and in Philadelphia, obviously regime change there, and so and my expectation is Zach Ertz moves on. My expectation is Alshon Jeffrey moves on. Yep. We'll see if Sean Jackson comes back, but I do think Reagor is a guy that's shown flashes, and I think healthy, new coach, fresh start. Hopefully a better quarterback situation if they figure out Hurts and Wentz, and what's going on there. I'm just sort of scrolling through some of my
What do you think of Irv Smith up here in Minnesota?
I like Irv Smith. I mean, the challenge is, I like him, but the challenge is like, as long as Zimmer's the head coach, they're still going to be run heavy. Now you've got Jefferson and Thielen. Like, it's just, and Rudolph will steal 3 to 5 touchdowns a year. Like, and so love Irv Smith, the player. Love Irv Smith, the player, but fantasy wise, I have a few other guys that I'll just give you real quick. I'm looking at these are guys that are currently on my dynasty team. This is on the ESPN one. So we already talked to a few of them. We talked about Scotty Miller and Logan Thomas, although he's not a sleeper anymore. How about Adam Trautman?
Oh yes,
yeah. There was reports this week that they expect big things out of him, but Jared Cook's probably going to be out of the picture because they're over the cap by $1 bajillion. So I wouldn't be surprised if Trautman is the starter there. Cole Kmet's another one that I'm trying to invest in.
Cole Kmet.
You talk about snap share. He was playing almost 100% of the snaps with Jimmy Graham down the stretch, and they call him the natural. The Chicago the coaching staff does. So I expect big things from Cole Kmet going forward. So I'm trying to acquire him at a decent price too.
I mean, listen, J.K. Dobbins is an obvious one, but I'll give you 2 guys that I sort of like. I have Rashard Higgins. I think is interesting, especially if
Hollywood
something happens with OBJ, right? Mm-hmm. A guy that's absolutely dirt cheap that it's likely sitting on the free agent wire in your dynasty league right now is Antonio Gandy-Golden.
He's forgotten. Yeah.
But this is a guy that I think is very talented. There's certainly opportunity in Washington. My expectation is they go and they sign a Galladay, a Robinson, one of these big name free agent wide receivers, a Fuller. But I do think when people get hurt, we tend to forget about him. And just, he's a physical freak. He's, or can fly, massive wingspan. And I know they like him. I know they were excited about getting him in there.
Him and Bryant Edwards are probably the two that were hurt early on and lost that hype that they got, because I know Gandy-Golden had a little hype going into the season, then he got hurt, and then Bryant Edwards was the same. And then
after Kelvin Harmon went down, there was like, ooh, there's target share available for Gandy-Golden, and then he gets COVID and gets hurt, and then we never see him again, and we're like, ugh, like what could have been?
Cam stepped up. I got one more name for you.
All right, and we'll get you out of here.
Unfortunately, none of my dynasty leagues allow for pickups right now, because if I did, I would have picked them up in all these leagues, just because you never know. But Andrew Luck.
I knew you were going to say Andrew Luck.
I said it yesterday. I have a gut feeling. I just have a gut feeling.
For a little while. They need a quarterback. They built a good culture.
They're competitive. They've got a good line now.
You know what you do? I've said this for a bunch of people. You get Jonathan Taylor, Quentin Nelson, you get Michael Pittman all in one room and say, Luck, these are just 3 of your players. Oh, and let's not forget your defense, DeForest Buckner. Bring him in.
Darius Leonard.
Yeah.
I don't know anything there's no inside, I'm not getting any inside text from Shefty or anything like that.
It's the ultimate flyer that could pay off massive
right. Yeah. Like if he stays
going to hurt,
whatever, you lose, but yes.
I still have him on a couple rosters, not going to lie.
What are the chances he comes back? 5%, 10%? Like it's
you just never know.
I'd maybe say a little higher after they lost out on Stafford. I bet they're talking to him a little more.
I'm sure they are. The obvious connection everyone says is, do they make a trade for Wentz? Do they try to figure out a way to reconnect Frank Reich and Carson Wentz? Had a lot of success. They were personally close. Makes a lot of sense. Makes life easier for the new coach, for Sirianni in Philadelphia, right? Because now, Jalen Hurts is your guy. They got to figure out some cap, but maybe Wentz is like, hey, I'll restructure my deal to get out of Philadelphia and to go back with Frank Reich. So, but yeah, I think there's a non-zero chance Andrew Luck plays next year in the NFL.
I like it.
Yeah. So Matt, we're going to get you out of here. Hopefully this gives you an opportunity to launch your career into the stratosphere, and you can make a full-time living out of this fantasy football thing. Super difficult, but we're praying and hoping for the best for you, that you can establish that. You got 5 kids to feed. So, fantasy football, you can do it. You got a great personality and great insight. So thanks for coming on, and we hope to see you somewhere in the future.
I do want to say your book is amazing, and I suggest everybody go out and read it. It holds up. It's an evergreen type book. It's not something that kind of loses the structure of now. But I've read it twice. I've listened to it on tape another time. It's amazing. I laugh at the stories, and I mean, I feel like I know you without even talking to you in that book. It's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you gave me the confidence to do this. And I thank you for everything you do. Well,
Tyler, that's incredibly kind and gracious of you. Thank you very much. That means a lot. It's the thing, that book is the thing I'm proudest of. It took me, over 2 years of my life to write. If you enjoy my writing, it's the best thing I've ever written. If you hate my writing, I think you'll tolerate this more than anything else. Listen, and you can buy a used copy for like $1 or $2 on Amazon. So it's like, I'm not trying to sell the book. But it's out there, and I appreciate you saying that, Tyler. I wrote it with the idea of being both evergreen and hopefully inspirational. So the fact that it spoke to you in a way means a great deal to me. And congratulations on all the success you guys have had. And so it's great to see. And I'm always a big fan of anyone that brings a positive contribution to the fantasy community, and you guys have absolutely done that. So it's my pleasure to be on the show and be happy to do it again.
All right, thanks, Matt. We appreciate that. We'll let you go. We'll talk to you later. Thanks for joining us.
You bet. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cool.